In the world of politics, a tight Senate race in Pennsylvania is heating up even more. Meanwhile, a delegation of high-profile Republicans heads to Ukraine to meet with President Zelensky and survey the carnage of the Russian attacks for themselves. Joining us to break down everything happening on and off the Hill is Yahoo Finance contributor Kevin Cirilli. Kevin.
Can we start in Pennsylvania, where tomorrow is the Senate primary, and it has really got everybody, political junkies, really carefully watching this. Let's start on the Republican side, where Kathy Barnett, who is what her opponents would call her, an ultra MAGA Republican, has skyrocketed and surged in Republican polls. That has put Dr. Oz, who former President Trump endorsed, as well as Dave McCormick, who is trying to run as a more moderate Republican, on defense. And so a lot of folks that I've been talking with over the last week and who are carefully watching the Pennsylvania Republican Senate primary race are fascinated to see what could emerge. Then on the left, you've got John Fetterman, who is leading against the more moderate candidates, including Congressman Connor Lamb. Remember him from a couple of years ago. But he just suffered a stroke. Now, his campaign says that that he made a full recovery, that he's doing okay. But no question, this is a political state that has always been a battleground and has captured the attention of this midterm cycle.
And Kevin, just as a quick follow-up on that, so much attention has been paid to the primaries in Pennsylvania. Do we know what a matchup is going to look like in the general?
Well, so it's a great point, because if Fetterman, as the polls suggest, gets the Democratic nomination and Barnett skyrockets and wins, or even Dr. Oz, suddenly you have two candidates who have positioned themselves as partisans. And so where do the independents go? Where do the moderates go? Dave McCormick and Connor Lamb kind of have each in their own rights tried to run a much more moderate campaign. But to your point, where do those swing suburban voters go? That will be the fight for it. And will they even be targeted by either campaign, or will it just be a turnout base election? And I think that's really what makes this race so fascinating, is because it's a larger illustration of the whole entire American domestic political process right now as a whole.
So moving from the domestic political process to the international political situation, Mitch McConnell visiting Ukraine, and he's calling on President Biden to label Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. What's the latest with that?
Well, for sure. And should President Biden do that, Russia would join Cuba, Syria, Iran, and North Korea. So it's an additional layer of sanctions, for lack of a better word, and additional scrutiny that would fall on Russia President Putin for his aggression against Ukraine. Now, it's notable because Leader McConnell has also been calling on lawmakers to advance and support the $40 billion in additional Ukraine aid that President Biden has called for. There's wide bipartisan consensus that aid needs to be passed. But we talked about Pennsylvania just a second ago. Let's be blunt here. There is a contingency in the Republican Party, albeit a small one, that is against Leader McConnell in terms of being as supportive of funding for Ukraine. And so right now, Leader McConnell has been outspoken in his support for this $40 billion aid package. I anticipate that could get to President Biden's desk no later than early next week, maybe even this week. But this geopolitical issue, especially heading into the midterms, is probably the top on the foreign affairs front.
Kevin, while we have you, somewhat related on the international front, we do know that China is continuing to buy Russian oil right now, and that particularly while we've seen the Xi administration have a rising criticism at this point in time as well. They're combating some of the COVID cases. However, those measures certainly drawing a heavy level of scrutiny right now. So can you help us break this down and the purchases and the significance of that we're seeing from China continuing to buy Russian oil?
Well, for sure. And I think that in terms of the NATO alliance, especially when you've got countries like Finland who are looking to join the NATO alliance right now, and emboldening NATO at a time when when Xi Jinping and Putin are doing some type of delicate energy dance. And that has raised a lot of criticism. And I would echo here State Department spokesperson Ned Price, who has publicly said in the last couple of weeks that NATO is watching to see what Xi Jinping does, not only with the draconian measures of COVID restrictions in China. There's new scrutiny about the effectiveness of the Chinese vaccines. There's new scrutiny about those measures in terms of trying to combat COVID. But in addition to that, is Xi Jinping going to stand with Europe, with the United States, and with how the horrible aggression that Putin has exhibited on Ukraine, or is he going to try to buddy up to Vladimir Putin? And right now, that energy deal seems to indicate the latter.
We'll see what ends up happening. Kevin, good to see you. Kevin Cirilli, appreciate your time this morning.